so excited and pleased to introduce our two speakers today. The first is Denise Spivak, actually, and let me spotlight Denise. So the first is Denise Spivak. Denise is the CEO of CenterLink, the Association of LGBTQ Community Centers, where she has spent the past 9 years working with center leaders. Denise joined CenterLink after working in the private sector for over 20 years in both broadcasting and management. She's a graduate of Gettysburg College, where she received her BA in psychology. Denise was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area. After living in the Mid-Atlantic for 30 years, she and her wife moved to Florida, where they currently reside. I'm also happy to introduce Julia Landis, who I will now spotlight. Julia is the Director of Operations and Member Relations at CenterLink. She joined the CenterLink team after working in the private sector for over 25 years. And prior to joining CenterLink, Julia was a store manager in a neighborhood invitation store, which sounds super fun. Previously, she spent over 9 years working for a major telecommunications company as both a manager and online representative in a customer service call center. Julia is a graduate of the University of South Alabama, where she received her BS in business management. And with that, I will turn it over to Denise and Julia for how to grow your LGBTQ plus center or organization.
Yay. Thank you so much, Meng. We appreciate the invitation. Appreciate you having us here. And I'm going to pull up the very short slideshow that we have put together here to go with the presentation. And so we are here to talk about how to grow your LGBTQ plus center or organization. And hopefully we'll answer some questions or create some questions in your mind along the way, but happy to address everything we can to help you to do one or both of the following. So a little bit, Ming has told you most of where we are and what we've done in the past. This is my fourth career. And hopefully my last career, because I really like this one. I am located in Fort Lauderdale, which is the traditional land of the Tequesta and Seminole, and have been here for just about 21 years and never expected that I would be. Just a couple of things on there for why I do what I do and the trainings that I have to sort of put through along the way. And Jules, I'll let you introduce yourself too.
Okay. Julia Landis, again, she, her, hers, Director of Operations and Member Relations at CenterLink. Really cool fun fact. Denise and I started on the exact same day, pretty much at the exact same minute. Went to work for this amazing gentleman named Terry Stone, who was CenterLink's, spearheaded a lot of growth before Denise came on and became our CEO. So we've had I consider it a total privilege, to work together and to be, help CenterLink grow, and mostly to help our centers grow, to help them grow and create more impact. Yeah. And it gives me an opportunity to learn everything I know from coaching and from managing and the previous career to help our communities and their centers grow. Right. So let's go.
Thanks, Jules.
Sure. So
at the core of it, we're really kind of nonprofit consultants that get the privilege and joy of working in the LGBTQ plus community. So a little bit more about CenterLink, just so you have a frame of reference as to what we do. We strengthen, support, and connect LGBTQ community centers. It's what we do all day, every day. That includes a lot of different things that we'll get to in just a little bit. But we were founded in 1994 as a member-based coalition by the leaders of the 5 largest LGBT centers at the time. We have grown quite a bit since then. 285 member organizations, and that grows pretty much every day. And we are national and global in reach, so primarily United States and Canada. And we do have members in Australia, China, Colombia, and Uganda. We are a GuideStar Platinum participant. We are top rated by great nonprofits, a champion of change by the White House, and good years. We are board source certified, and we are licensed consultants for standards of excellence. Part of what we do is partnering, and we work with a lot of other national organizations that work to advance the rights of LGBTQ individuals, and thus we can make those connections with our member centers so that information and key analysis, key issues can be shared both at the national level, but also getting down into the local level. And we act as a voice for LGBT community centers in coalition building, grassroots organizing, social activism. And the whole goal is to strengthen and build this unified center movement that we have operating now. We offer a number of different programs: leadership development, we expand organizational capacity, we build the network that I talked about, we do one-to-one technical assistance, we offer advice. We're kind of like, in case of emergency, break glass place, a shoulder to cry on and a hand to pat your back when things have gone well. But at the end of the day, the big thing is that leaders of our centers, our member centers and member organizations don't feel like they're alone. Leading a nonprofit organization can be incredibly lonely. For those of you who do it, I know you know what I'm talking about. So we really strive to provide that community for center leaders where they can find support and resources and inspiration themselves after trying to provide that all day for their communities and their staff. So the programs, mentioned a couple of them, but we do have Center Awareness Day that's every October 19th to honor Terry Stone, who Julia mentioned. That's his birthday. So we made that Center Awareness Day. We have our annual Leadership Summit, an annual e-summit. We offer boot camps and webinar series and programming calls and listservs. We have Health Link, Youth Link, and Action Link programs. We have the My CenterLink online resource portal. We offer a job board, and we do a biennial LGBT Center survey report, which we do every other year. And so this year we'll be embarking on a new one. Last one we did was in 2020. We had about 186 participating centers. And something that was novel about last 2021 was that we did incorporate a lot of analysis on the impacts of COVID on the operations of our centers. So that was really some good information that we were able to gather. And just did some quick facts about centers. So there are big centers and small centers and everything in between. For the purpose of this study, we made small centers anything with budgets of $150,000 or less. The Los Angeles LGBT Center is not only the largest center in the movement, it's also the largest LGBT organization in the world, with a budget, I think now of about $265 million, if I'm not mistaken. And hundreds of staff and multiple campuses, and not the norm. So when we broke it down in terms of having space, the rentals are pretty much the same. About 54% of small centers, 56% of big centers rent their space. 37% of big centers own, as opposed to 8% of small centers, and 35% of small centers have absolutely no space, which is true of only about 4% of larger centers. Most centers are open an average of about 43 hours a week. Small centers can go down to about 29, large centers at about 49 hours a week. And then looking at paid staff in key positions, more likely to find executive directors in the mid-sized to larger centers. A lot of small centers, especially when we're talking 150,000 or below, not only do not have an ED, many of them do not even have staff. So if they do, they're probably most likely to either have that ED or administrative director position, and that's usually about it. So that's just a quick snapshot of the center movement. And I'm going to turn it over to Julia as we talk about the who's, what's, where's, when's, why's, and how's of starting or growing your organization.
Okay. Thank you. Can we flip to the next one?
Absolutely.
Here we go. Awesome. Okay. So one of the things that I receive at least once a week is a call or an email. My community doesn't have a center. I'd like to start a center. Or I get a call, well, we've got a small organization and it's time to grow and we need to get organized. Okay. So some of the questions that I talk to folks about and I ask is, why are folks wanting to start a center or organization, or why do they want to grow the one they have? And what I do encourage is that folks literally write these down. All right. It's a powerful tool, and B, so that you're clear and that when you're going before your board or you're explaining to your friends, that type of deal, you have something to refer to. But why is a really important thing. When the going gets tough, you have to know why you wanted to start something in the first place. And usually your why is a lot bigger than you are. It's based on other people, not necessarily you. I mean, and there are folks who literally do what I call solve their own problem. If there's not a center or there's not services in their area, well, let me go start a center so that I'll have services, but then everybody else is going to have services too. So super important to know why you're going to do it. The other piece of the question we ask is why now? There's usually a tipping point. There's some little thing that tips somebody over the edge and go, okay, we have to have a center, and propels them or motivates them enough to do some research and reach out and contact us at CenterLink. Couple of other questions is, what benefit would it bring to your community? And usually that's a no-brainer if there's really not a lot else there. What folks don't realize is there's usually some type of LGBTQ resources and organizations that are currently in the city. And I broaden that to be everybody who's serving the community, be that if it's the church, if it's a health department, the health department is always doing HIV testing, STD testing, that type of deal. If somebody ends up HIV positive, then they're helping to get them into what's referred to as case management and care, so that they get them on, I don't want to say the appropriate medications, but all of that. So yes, they live long, fruitful lives. So there's currently, in my opinion, in my experience, always somebody that's helping the community, okay, be it directly or indirectly. This is another question, is who has done a needs assessment or survey of the needs and interest in the community? And that can be somebody who did a survey a few years ago. And what a needs assessment essentially is just, a survey on steroids with some really specific questions. Has your organization done that? Has another organization done that? Has one ever been done? Lots of times a really good place to check on a community needs assessment and then survey is with the health department. All right. Health departments love data. It helps them get money to help people via the state and the federal government and the CDC, et cetera. So they're always interested in a good survey. But really important to talk and interact with the community in a survey format to see do they want a center? It's one of the first questions. Do we need a center in our area? Do we need a center in our city? If so, what do you think the top 3 things the center should do? Would you support it? And it's also important for something that's called SOGI data, sexual orientation and gender identity data. And what that data does is, when you've collected that, it is really good to go to funders, and in particular, city council person, county commissioners, those type, particularly your folks that say still that gay people don't exist, or we don't have any gay people. And when you have data that says that they exist, it's a lot easier to be accepted. And there's a lot less, quote unquote, fight as you begin your organization. Can we go to the next slide?
Yeah, we can. And Jules, I just wanted to chime in here. Even if your organization has done one in the past, it's a good idea to revisit those every 3 or so years as you're embarking on new strategic plans or strategic visioning, because organizations change, needs change, communities develop. And so it's really easy for us to get stuck sitting in our offices, our chairs with our friends saying, you know what we need to do, you know what this community would benefit from. But, that's really that's great that we think that, but nobody else does. So, and nobody would come to it. So it's just really important to do that initially, but also to revisit that along the way.
Revisit, you bet. And it could be that the first community needs assessment was done and somebody solved the top 3 problems in that were identified. And then your center is going to come along and take on the next 3. And that's really amazing. Okay. More things to think about. Who is helping you? Do you have a core group of folks who will volunteer over the next 5 years? And I call this your founding committee. We never work alone. We never row. And, we always row with others in a boat, regardless of what's happening and going on. And I always suggest sitting down and having coffee, nowadays it would be via Zoom, with all the other folks that are doing work within the LGBTQ community, as well as all the folks that own LGBTQ businesses, guidance counselors, psychiatrists, medical folks who are serving the community, and ask them, what do they think about having a center? All righty. And then are you interested, if they think it's a great idea, are you interested in helping us get one started? All right. And that's what I call a founding committee, which is very different from a board. All right. Once you've gotten further in the building process. The other is, how are you going to fund your center? Okay. It's starting an LGBTQ community center or organization is literally like starting a business. It's going to have a budget. It's got to run in the black. Okay. A nonprofit, a 501c3 or a nonprofit or a 501c4, that's an advocacy organization. All of that is a tax status with the IRS. Otherwise, you're running a business very similar to somebody who's a hairdresser, somebody who's a real estate person, or anybody else that's starting a business. It has to turn a profit, okay, or it can't help people. Okay. It doesn't stay in business and it can't help people. Folks ask me all the time about buildings, we've got some space, that type of thing that that we think would be great for a center. And this is where, how will it be funded? In order to have a building, it's like getting an apartment. You have to have an income stream. You have to have something to pay for the water, the sewer, the trash, the internet, and all the insurances. So the next is, what's the plan? And have you created a business plan for starting a center? Alrighty. And then what's involved in your center? Okay. What's involved? What are you, how do you want to grow it? Do you have a specific model that you want to use? Flip on. Yay. Okay. Couple more things to think about. What's the budget? I always encourage that a first budget for a center includes the money to incorporate. It includes the money to apply for your 501c3. If there's not an attorney on your founding committee, because attorneys, even if they're not a specialization in nonprofits, attorneys know other attorneys. And when they talk to other attorneys, there's no money involved. But if they have to talk to you, the clock starts, and so does the money. So, what is your budget? Encompasses, like I said, applying for your 501c3, incorporating in the state where you are. You need to have director and officers insurance because you're becoming an official board. And you also need to do a background check on all your board members. You literally want to be able to walk into any room and have people, humans of any age, and be able to interact. And what I mean by the any age is you're not only checking databases that have a relation to kids or folks that are under 18, you're also checking databases in relation to folks that are over 60. Seniors are also very, very vulnerable. Who's on the board? This is a big one. Ideally, and when you're growing a center, and so particularly starting a center is the best time. And then when you grow your organization, that you're growing your board intentionally, and both times you're growing your board very intentionally, is that the members of your board very much, as in highly encouraged, strongly encouraged, that they reflect the community of which you're serving. All right. Gone are the days where everybody on a board doesn't look like the community they're serving. If your community is mostly Latinx, then that's who needs to be on the board. If your community is a community of color, that's who needs to be on the board. And it's being very intentional within your community about who you want on the board and what skills they're bringing to the table. It's nice to have a lawyer. It's nice to have a doctor. It's, nice to have somebody that's adept at sales, adept at finance. And what I mean by sales is that they're used to asking people for money. All right. They're used to telling people and selling things and just asking people for money. What are the risks? When we talk about risk, there's always the risk of nobody's going to support it. Okay. And that's where your community needs assessment comes in. Denise and I are familiar with a city in the Southeast where folks asked, do you want a center of the adults? There was already a youth center, and asked, hey, what do you think about we start a community center? And the community needs assessment resoundingly came back and said, no, we don't want one, that we wouldn't support it. And these guys said, well, we're going to build it anyway. And so they did, and nobody came and nobody supported it. And it lasted probably maybe a year and a half. I can't remember. Right. So there's always the risk that folks won't support it. Okay. There's always the risk that you've gotten some funding and then that funding ends. And unfortunately, planning or not planning or some things didn't follow through. And it doesn't work. Okay. There's always the risk that people won't come, that they don't want to, they say they'll support it and then they don't. And you get to look at why. Okay. Next slide.
And I'm just going to toss in that there are then some real hard risks about financial risk. So dealing with risk early on in an organization. And when we talk about risk, there are the sort of very obvious risks that Jules has mentioned, right? But then there's also those administrative behind the scenes risks that we don't always talk about. So having the right insurance, making sure that you're doing a risk checklist, and risk can be anything from insurable things to non-insurable things. Doing those kind of SWOT analyses internally to make sure that you're looking at current and potential risks. So risk is a big thing that it sometimes takes organizations many years to deal with, but if you can jump on that early, you could have a really a smoother operation, I guess, would be what I'd say about that.
I will say at CenterLink that Denise and I, as operations, and she's the CEO, we talk about it. Okay. We talk about, what systems do we have in place? What policies and procedures do we have in place? Our finance director is communicating with our accountant on a regular basis as to our systems adequate. Denise meets regularly with our IT group that we contract with to handle all of our computers so that we have the correct cyber security. Our systems are as secure as we can. We have the correct things in place, and that's both just for peace of mind. And so we all go to bed at night as it is for, we've got to meet the needs and the criteria of our cyber insurance policy. Okay. So it's, those are some of them along those lines.
Yep.
Yeah. You bet.
So that's just our contact information if you so need it. I promised you it would be a short slideshow. So there we go. It's a short slideshow.